Chris Barrett, Productivity Commission, dare I say jobs for the boys? I might start with Kerry first, that's more fun.
Well, I think the issue for Chris Barrett, and I don't know him at all, and I'm sure he's...
Well, he was Chief of Staff to Wayne Swan.
I was going to say...
was his deputy.
Yeah, and I would have thought that the problem the government's going to have to convince anyone is that the Productivity Commission has got an incredible role, particularly, guess what, it talks about productivity a lot, and the government's been talking about productivity a lot. We'd assume that the Productivity Commission was independent of the government.
Yeah, well,
one has to now question how, and I'm not throwing any aspersions on this man at all.
No, you have to be careful with this.
No, I'm not throwing any aspersions.
He also appears well qualified.
Yeah, he is very qualified, I'm sure. But I mean, the problem for the government is one of perception. You know, is this someone who they, he obviously they have confidence in him, but will they be able to persuade everybody else that he will be sufficiently independent to actually be able to do the job as well as we know he's capable of doing?
All right. Well, just on that, I mean, there are boards and there are boards, right? This is the Productivity Commission. It's not, you know, the SCG Trust and all these other ones.
Look, there are jobs for boys and there are jobs for boys. This is not, I think, a job for the boy, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Arthur Sinodinos. He was the Chief of Staff to Prime Minister John Howard, went on to become the ambassador to the United States and performed impeccably, and no one ever had any arguments about that.
As did Andrew Peacock, as did Kim Beazley.
So this is very well covered territory. Now, Chris Barrett has a similar background. He was a public servant. He was in Treasury. He was in the Victorian Treasury. He was in recently, yes. And he's a smart man.
Good guy.
And he's independent and he's capable of giving very strong advice. And what you do want from anybody who's been in that role is exactly that. So I think this is a beat up of monumental proportions. Chris Barrett was an ambassador to the OECD. He was he's a Treasury official he's a Treasury official in Victoria. And he's had public servant jobs for the great bulk of his career.
So we give him 12 months and see how independent he is.
Yeah, well, exactly. And give everybody 12 months and see how independent or otherwise they are.
Well, I don't know. If I went for that job and this bloke got it, I'm not sure I'd be too happy. But let me just put this to
They wouldn't give you the job.
Yeah, well...
You've got to be qualified.
I was just wondering where all your board appointments are. I would have thought you would have got something over the years.
I know, I keep throwing my name out there.
Hey, you and me both. The only board appointment I got, your boss gave me, which was to the cricket ground.
That's the sort of guy he is.
Yeah. The trust.
Yeah. Premier Bob Carr rang me and said, would I like to be on the trust? I told him,
so he could appoint a couple of his mates.
No, I've got to tell you, at the time, I was the only...
And you are a great appointment. It just shows how these things can be bipartisan and sensible. Politicians and staffers can make very good board appointments.
Chris Minns was, hypocrisy in politics, who would have thought, you know? But Chris Minns was happy to go on and on about John Barilaro getting a New York job. And then he gives Morris Yema chair of the trust. He gives Josh Murray, who used to be Chief of Staff to Morris,
I think the problem was
the Transport Department.
Barilaro had a lot of other problems that Morris Yema doesn't have, and it didn't really, at the end of the day, come down to whether he was performing that role or not. It was the way in which the selection process went on with Barilaro.
Oh, apparently it was only the selection.
And by the way,
you know that?
There are plenty of people who have held those positions in the past. If they're uncontroversial, no one gives a damn about them. You would be surprised about how many people who have held political positions are on boards around Australia at the moment.
And let me put my hand up by saying that I think it's a great appointment. Morris will do an amazing job. He's got a political background, but he's got a sporting background. He's got an organisational background. He will have the interest of all the sports who want to play across all the venues that New South Wales manage.
Do you feel the same?
It's great.
Do you feel the same about Josh Murray?
Well, Josh, I don't know.
But he's a staffer, and now he's head of a department.
Once again, somebody who has been a long time out of politics, who's held down very senior positions in the private sector, and is being brought back in now to head the Transport Department. Again, let's see how he goes. I know Josh Murray, and I think he is an impeccable appointment. And by the way, these appointments are often made by other sides of politics as well. And Morris Yema was appointed to various positions by Liberal governments. So let's not get too precious about these.
Let me quickly say on Josh, that is an incredibly difficult portfolio, and the dramas in it are becoming more and more obvious day by day.
Well,
he's got a huge job. That is
government.
Definitely 12 months' time. You and I will all sit here and see
let's have a talk about it.
Absolutely.
The previous government did create a lot of problems.
Tony Burke, it looks to me like Sally McManus wants something. Tony Burke goes, OK, here you go. Bang. One after.
Well, hang on.
What do you reckon? I'll get to you.
Yeah.
Crikey.
Well, it certainly looks that way. And, you know, I understand Mr Burke's a former union official and he has particular allegiances to the union movement. But, I mean, the process that he goes through, and look, whether these things are good or not, the process is what's annoying me, because every time he makes one of these announcements, the first thing we hear from the employer side is nobody's spoken to us. We don't know. We didn't know this was coming. We had no idea that this is what he was going to do.
It was an election commitment.
Well,
it was an election commitment.
What do you say to all
So it was an election commitment for starters. So the Liberals had an opportunity, the business community had an opportunity to talk about it. It's basically rectifying something which was changed by the High Court 2 years ago, and that is that if you've been in casual employment but really are doing a job which a permanent employee should do, then you're entitled to say, I want to become a permanent employee, give up the benefits that I have from being a casual, that is higher hourly wages, in return for superannuation, sick benefits and the like. Not an unreasonable proposition, I would suggest, in a first world country.
All right, I've got to wrap. I'm being told to wrap. Kerry Chikarovski, Bruce Hawker. We could go for half an hour. We're not going to. Thank you very much for your time this Monday. See you next week.